everybody, what's up? It is Jason Wojcik. I'm your host for the Life in Air Show, where we help people create abundant, awesome, prosperous lives and businesses they love. I am joined by my co-host, Polish Peter Kolot. PPK, what's up? PPK in the house.
Did you just call me PPK? Let's not go there, okay? Because this, I start seeing rumors already spreading. Because there's some people like Charlie, not going to mention any names, but I start seeing them spreading rumors about PPK.
Okay, well, yeah.
Polish Peter.
Okay. Well, all right. We'll just go with Polish Peter for now. All right, everyone, listen. This is an incredible episode we have coming up right now. We're talking with Shae Bynes. And Peter, like you've known Shae for a while too. I never really had the chance to talk with her. I talked with her about a week ago for the first time. Seen many communications with her, by her. I've listened to her podcast. I'm familiar with Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur, her company, and it's this interview is really inspirational because she talks about partnering with God in her business, right? Like how many of us are partners with God in some area of our lives? Typically, by the way, the ones we need help in the most are where we start to look like. So if we have really like a lot of health issues, we're praying for God to help us with our health or whatever, but so few people actually make God a business partner, right? And so it's really cool to see that and to openly see how she shares that, because we live in a culture where sometimes that's kind of like looked at a little bit squiggly, where people get a little uptight about that kind of phrasing or that kind of outlook.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this particular episode because one huge distinction that I want you guys to listen for during this particular podcast is the difference between working and having the business work for God versus with God. And I think it's a very slight distinction, but it's such a huge thing. And I think Shae is one of the very few people that I've heard in my life describe what it actually looks like to have God be as your business partner. Literally sitting right next to you, like the board of directors kind of thing. He is there, right? He's the one who leads the thing. And it's just such an amazing way to actually see her describe it and talk about it and her spirit. If you haven't seen this on YouTube, check it out on YouTube because you can just see her pour her heart out and share some really cool stuff here.
Yeah, let's jump into it. All right, here's our interview with Shae Bynes of Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. Hey, Shae, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Life in Air Show.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, this is such a privilege and honor. I got to tell you, we've spoken once before this personally, but I have known about you for such a long time now. It's been really, really cool to make the connection with you in person. And originally, we have some mutual connections through the real estate investing niche. And in particular, Steve Cook, my business partner in Life in Air, had, I guess you guys, did he have an influence on you, or did you guys actually have some sort of relationship together through investing?
Well, so both. The reason why I ever became a real estate investor, went from thinking about real estate investing to actually doing real estate investing, is because of Steve. And so when he had the flipping homes community back in the day, I think this was like 2007, around there. I was still working my full-time job at the time as well. And it was just being a part of that community and being underneath the teaching and the coaching he was doing that I was like, hey, there's a community of folks here that will support me along the way as I clearly will probably make some mistakes, and I'm just going to go for it. And so that was the beginning of getting to know Steve, was just those interactions online in the forums, right? But over time we became, we had a more go back and forth, a personal relationship over time.
Oh, got it. Well, and so that's awesome. And I even remember hearing you about that specific phase of your life. But what has absolutely shocked me and impressed me more than anything has been your transition into this mission. It feels like more than anything else, this mission, this business, this community called Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur.
Yes.
And so tell our listeners what that is about.
Yeah. So Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur, which was started almost 8 years ago now, 2012. Everything we focus on is around inspiring, teaching, and mentoring entrepreneurs who really desire to do business led by God, to be empowered by God in the work that they do so they can have a greater kingdom impact through the work that they do in the marketplace. And so there's a lot of things that kind of come underneath that, but that's the reason why we exist, to help people shift into what does it look like to actually do business with God, not just for his glory, but like with him. in partnership with him.
So what inspired, like, what was, what inspired you to go down this path? Like you were doing real estate and then
Yes.
like, whoa, like what went on here?
I was just minding my own business.
That's how everything is. Yeah.
I had like these series of what I call divine interruptions of my life. So one of my real estate buddies, who I actually met in flipping homes as well, his name's Steve Washington. And he contacted me one day, we were friends, and he said to me, hey, I met this woman and I really felt like I'm supposed to connect you with her. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So he connects me with this woman. I have a chat with her on the phone. The whole time we're talking, I'm thinking, she's cool, but I don't know why he was so adamant that, we meet. And at the end of that call, she says to me, one of my clients, she was a business coach, and she says, one of my clients, I really feel like I'm supposed to connect you to. And I'm like, okay. And so, she introduced me to her. Her name's Antonina Gear. And this was March 2012. And when we hopped on the phone, Jason, it was just like, it was clearly a divinely orchestrated meeting. And we became quick friends. And she's in South Carolina. I'm in Florida. And about a month and a half into our friendship and just getting to know each other, I said to her, there is a really specific reason why we met, but I don't know what it is, but I feel it. Like, it's a very specific reason. And she goes, I've been feeling that too. I said, well, let's pray about it and come back in a week and talk about it. And so we did that, came back in a week, talked about some stuff. It wasn't those things. I was like, it's something. So pray, come back in a week, pray, come back in a week. We did that 3 times. And on that last round, she says to me, Shae, I have some words that the Lord gave me. I put them in a journal. I have no idea what it's about, what it means, what he wants me to do with them. But the words are kingdom-driven entrepreneur. And now when she said this, the craziest thing happened. So she says those words. And as soon as she said it, what flew out of my mouth, which was the Holy Spirit, because I didn't know what I was talking about. I just said, that's a community, that's a movement, and it starts with a book. And then we were both like, oh,
what just happened?
Okay. Yeah. And so it was seriously a God orchestrated, complete interruption of where I was headed, what I was doing type of thing. It's not something that I planned. It's not something that I had a dream about, nothing like that. It was just, it's an assignment that showed up in my life. And what's so funny about it though, is that the same person, she's co-founder, she's not even involved in the operations anymore. Like in about 2 years in, the Lord's like, okay, you've done your part. Like I have another assignment for you. So interesting how he gave her those words that she didn't know what it was about until I met her. And then the craziest part is that neither of us really knew what a kingdom-driven entrepreneur was at the moment that I said that. It was like, okay, well, let's go figure out what does that mean?
Wow.
It's just a crazy story. It really is.
That and so, okay, so here you are, you have like a series of inexplicable events that in any other fashion other than by divine intervention are completely impossible. You
Pretty
have
much.
this assignment given to you. And now, what do you do? Are you praying for guidance? Are you like, how do you start to flesh out what KDE is and what it's supposed to be and what to do and the steps?
Yeah. So it's been different in different phases. So in the very beginning, before we even launched, it was 6 months of, okay, what is this? What exactly do you mean by these words, kingdom-driven entrepreneur? It was a whole lot of praying, a whole lot of sitting with the Lord, the two of us, and just like, what is this? What is it that you're wanting us to do? What is this book that we're writing? We've never been this, like, so what are we writing? That whole process of just kind of working through that with him, which was it was just so counterintuitive for both of us too. Mm-hmm. And so even in that first year, I remember people keep asking us, are you a business? And we're like, yeah. And they're like, well, how are you monetizing? We're like, we don't know. Because we just didn't know what this thing was. We knew it was a community, it was a movement, and it started with a book. So we did the book. We released the book on Kindle. We started the community on Facebook. We did the things we knew how to do based off of that. I think we operated off of that word that it was a community, it's a movement, and it starts with a book for like a whole year. Because it was just like, he wasn't showing us anything else. So we were just serving people as best as we could, and as we were learning, we were sharing. So we never showed up like, hey, we're the guru experts who have 10,000 hours of expertise in this thing. We never showed up that way. We always showed up in full authenticity, like this is a God assignment. We don't even really know what we're doing. We're being led by God every step of the way. So the only reason why we look like we know what we're doing is because God is helping us. That's the only reason, right? Because this came out of the blue for both of us, And that's what it was like. We were the most praying people, seriously, like no joke. We were the most praying people ever in those first several months because we just really wanted to know what was his heart for this thing and what are we supposed to do with it. But then once there was clarity around that, you know, it probably took it was after Antonina left, to be honest. It was around that 2.5-year mark where I really started to kind of get my arms around it a little bit more. Instead of having a vision for like a week, I'd have vision for like maybe a month or 2 months or 3 months, you know? And then there was kind of a bit more of like, now I could be creative and explore a bit more and see how best can we serve and those types of things. So it's been a lot of phases in growth, personal growth, like spiritual growth in him, as well as growth of the movement. I mean, they have gone hand in hand. As I grow, it grows. And that's just the way it's been, to be honest.
You know, so I just want to pause there for a second, because just think of how counterintuitive this approach is to the average entrepreneur who wants to have all of they want to take their own initiative. They want to have their own ideas. They want to direct their steps and then have a path, like have a business plan. And you were waiting for this to be essentially given to you. And so I'm guessing you were, there's all kinds of things going on. So maybe you were, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's an element of patience here that you had to of, right? and also probably setting aside, I don't know, maybe setting aside some of your own initiatives. Like you're like, hey, I'm smart, I can figure this out. But then pulling yourself back and be like, no, I want to make sure I do this right and follow his direction for this. Some faith for certain of like, hey, I mean, because now you made this transition here. This business wasn't, it doesn't sound like financially viable at this point yet. It didn't have legs.
At the beginning, no, it wasn't. And before I get to that, you said something I think is so important. There's a scripture in Hebrews somewhere that talks about it is with faith and patience that they receive the promises of God. And that is so my testimony. It is like with faith and patience, with ongoing faith and patience, we see the promises of God unfold. And now I forgot the question that you asked me. Oh, financially viable. So no, it wasn't in the beginning, because again, we didn't know exactly what we were doing. And I think the first money generating thing we did outside of the book, because after we gave it away for free to start things, we were selling it. Outside of that one little book, and then that became 2 books and then 3 books, like these short books that happened like in the first year. Outside of that, we had like an online summit where we had brought some speakers together around some topics for Christian entrepreneurs. And so there was that. But like the first year was like a $12,000 year, maybe $13,000 like all year. It was not a financially viable business. And the crazy part of the journey for me is that I was still at that point, I think about, I don't know how many months in it was, maybe around 8 or 9 months in, the Lord said to me to stop focusing on the other stuff I was doing at the time. Now we had properties that were cash flowing, but we weren't no longer actively looking at deals, not looking to flip anything, not mailing any letters for anything, nothing like that. I was coaching people who were getting into real estate at that time. That stopped. I was consulting people on how to get private money deals, private money funding for their deals, which is what we did with ours. Stopped that. It was like, he stopped everything. So you want to talk about learning about what it looks like to see God as provider. My husband is a massage therapist, but his business was still pretty small in revenue at that time too. So it was the craziest faith walk ever. But I got to tell you that I don't regret a minute of it, because no one can tell me that God is not provider. Like I have seen God provide in the most crazy, ridiculous debt cancellation, money coming from wherever, taking away the need for money in a certain situation that I thought I would need. Like I've seen him do so much craziness. It's just like, I know he's provider. So if I just stay in line with him, I'm good, And so I learned those lessons very early on, and I will continue the rest of my life operating in that way. Yeah.
I mean, what a journey in trust. Like not only does he want you to pursue this new thing, but he wants you to let go of the old stuff that was financially providing for you.
That's right. Because my mindset was that it was financially providing for me. And he wanted me to learn, no, I am financially providing for you. What you think is your provision is not your provision. I'm your provision. And I had to learn that. And I mean, even to this day, like almost 8 years in, he said to me, like, you will always have vision beyond your resources. I'm always going to be stretching you. So you're always going to have vision. There's always going to be an increase in more. You're always going to see me provide in some really wild ways. Like, just get comfortable, because this is your life, right? This is how it's going to work. And so that's what I've learned over the years. But in the meantime, things have grown. We have an awesome team. We've grown every year revenue wise. It took us 5 years to hit 6 figures of revenue, but it was just like, we've seen God move in the most amazing ways. And now we get to have impact in lives of folks all over the globe. It's been amazing. But it did start, and it's still to this day, is a lot of faith and patience. Always. Yeah.
Listen, I love your story. I'm sitting here, my jaws are like almost to the floor listening to you. And one thing that kind of resonates with me is I have like students in my own coaching. The conversation that I have a lot of times with them is like, listen, when it comes to walking with God, right? Like 500 feet in front of you. He knows 15 million feet in front, 15 million miles in front of you, right? Yeah. So there is that walk, that trust, that patience, that faith that you have to rely on, right? And I think so many people are focusing on the how.
Yes.
Right? As opposed to what, right? And it seems to me like for you, he's been giving you at the beginning little tiny visions. And as you have been trusting him in the walk, he's expanding those visions for you.
That's
Speak
exactly
a little
right.
bit to that, as far as like, somebody will ask, well, you know what? Yeah, I know walking and trusting the Lord, it's easy for you to say, right? It's not an easy walk, right? But speak to that as far as like how he has walked through you with that. What would you tell somebody in regards to that kind of a walk?
Yeah, I think it's important to embrace the idea of not being able to see far ahead. Because if you don't embrace that, then you will either just create everything in your own mind and just try to make everything happen, or you will never move. So you have to embrace the idea that there's only so much that you're going to see ahead of you. You're not always going to see around the corner. You're not always going to see very far. But it's also important to know that if you're standing still, you can't be course corrected. Like, how are you going to be directed if you're sitting still? I think about like the GPS, how when you're moving and if you go the wrong way, it's like recalculating. Yep. And for me, that's what it's been like walking this thing out with him. I'm moving with him. I'm working diligently just by the power of his grace. I'm moving, and I know that I don't have all the answers, but I'm doing the best I can with what I believe is the right way to go. But I'm staying close because I know at any time it's like, yeah, that's not it, hun. We're going to do this, or it's not quite that, it's this. And I've become okay with that. And to be honest, that was a journey because listen, my background is software engineering. I'm an engineer. And then my corporate career started off as an engineer, then became a project manager, then a program director. Everything that I've done in my career has been logically focused, analytically focused, strategically focused. So if it didn't make sense, I wasn't doing it. If I can't make it an if-then loop statement, if it's not making sense, I'm not doing it. I got backup plans for my backup plans. I have risk mitigated the mess out of this thing. That was my background, and that's what I've got. Those are like skills and gifts on the inside of me, but I had to lay all of that stuff down and yield that to God in order to learn how to walk with him. And then once I knew how to walk with him, it was like, oh, by the way, those are all gifts. Like the fact that you're an analytical mind, the fact that you're strategic, the fact that that's how you work, those are gifts I put out inside of you. Use them. But now they're yielded to me, and I had to learn what that looked like. Because I would always create my own plans. I always felt like I could I can figure it out. I can make it happen. That was the way I operated. That was a strength to me, but when I learned how to yield that to him, now in my weakness, I'm like stronger because of him and my weakness. And so now it's like, take all this, you can take all these gifts, use them however you want. But I want to do this in a way that is aligned with your heart and in your way, even if it looks completely countercultural to the way every business owner around me is doing it. I'm okay with that. And that's been my testimony and will always be at this point.
So, a couple of things strike me. One is like, I when you're speaking, I'm thinking, and when Peter's, the point you made, we typically think of stewardship as being over our money and things like that, but you have been a faithful steward with the message and the role and the assignment that God's given you, and the outcome will be exponentially greater than anything any human can do on their own. And so that's incredible. One thing I really want to highlight that you just said was, even if something's countercultural, even if it's, doesn't make sense, because all of us, we're in business. We're exposed to what is considered best practices, and
Yes.
hey, this is, this is what people are doing and they're successful. We should follow this model. Yet sometimes that could maybe even directly conflict with what you're downloading. Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah. So it became relatively easy in the first, I'd say, because this was so crazy for me. It was so different that I realized like I couldn't come up with a bunch of strategies. I think in a way I was actually kind of fortunate that I was given something that I literally couldn't have just like we could have sat there and tried to make up stuff, but we would have known we were making up stuff. There was really not a way to try to pull from the expert guru and
Mm.
all the different things to do. But as soon as like maybe we'd have clarity around something that we'd want to do. Let's say, for example, when we were doing when we did our first event. Here's a good example. Our first event, which was a retreat. Now, standard operating procedure would be know what's the outcome for the attendees of that event. What are you going to do during the event? What is the content flow going to look like? Have it all planned out, have your schedule, put that stuff together on a website, market it, get people to come, blah, 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 right? Typical. Okay. And logical, makes sense. No, not for us. It was when we're saying, okay, well, we're doing this event because we really felt like he wanted us to get people together. So we're like, all right, we're going to do this event. Well, we're trying to put the marketing copy together for it. And we're like, okay, well, what's the purpose of it? And like, what are we doing? This was very early on. He said, they're coming to encounter me. What does that mean? What do you mean they're coming to encounter you? Like, no, but what are we going to do with these business people that are coming to this event? You know, he says, put together a schedule. All right. So he put together a schedule. You guys, it said things like session A, session B, session C. Like, we didn't even know like what was going to be in it, you know? And then we're like, and now for me, this was very hard. And I'm like, okay, but we're going to market this now. So like, who are the speakers? Like, what are we doing? Like, what does this look like? He said, just put it out there. All right. So we put it out there with session this, session that, panel, we'll have worship here. And then, we just kind of threw it out there. Do you know that people from all over the country flew into Phoenix, Arizona? There was like I think it was like 37, 38 people at our first event. Most of them were not locals either. They came into Phoenix, Arizona for this event that we couldn't even tell them what they were going to experience there. So these people were literally just like, hey, well, I'd like to meet these people, I guess. It was with a price tag. It was $300. People were investing $300 for a ticket. Then they got to pay for their flight, pay for their hotel to not know what they're coming into. And all the way up into the event, like I'm talking about in the weeks prior when I'm like getting antsy, like, okay, now you're going to let it, like, what are we doing when we get there? He would, whether it was Antonina or myself, he'd be praying about it. He would give me logistics and would tell her, don't worry about it. They're coming to encounter me. He'd give me logistics like buy some journals. Okay. So he was keeping me busy by giving me logistics for things to handle that we had not thought about because we had never done an event before. So he's giving me logistics, telling her they're coming to encounter me. And then all the way up to the time that we went, we didn't know what was going to happen when we got there. And when I tell you, it was the most wild experience. Like, I remember I'm standing there and all he gave me was one story to tell. He told me nothing else. I didn't know anything else for the whole weekend other than this one story that I needed to tell. And so I remember after worship, me telling this one story. And I don't even know what happened. It turned into like this emotional healing and deliverance thing that went on. And then it was so crazy. I mean, these were things that I was like, I didn't think I operated that way, And so it was so spontaneous and so counter how I would normally operate. I would think that it would be excellence and stewardship to make sure I had all my I's dotted and all my T's crossed. And he's saying that is excellent, but what's most excellent is being led by me. And I'm asking you not to do that. And so we didn't. And we just saw, even to this day, that was in 2014. To this day, I still see the fruit of what happened that weekend in lives of people that were there. Like to this day, it's amazing. And I felt like I was going through boot camp, man. It was like going through Holy Spirit led boot camp, that's what it felt like in those early months, that first year of Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. And it had to be that way because we had to be able to model what it can sometimes be like for people when whatever they're doing in their business, it looks different. I remember talking to a real estate investor where he was telling me a story about how there was a deal that on paper, man, it looked awful. Like it looked like an awful deal. The Lord said to him, that's your deal. Well, what do you mean that's my deal? Because this looks really bad. And he gave him instructions on how to, you know, these pieces that he needed for the deal. And when he did it ended up being an amazing deal. But he's like, but on the outside, everything that all of my wisdom, all of my experience, everything that I knew from working in this industry for well over a decade told me that is a bad deal. But God said, that's a good deal. Let me show you how to work it, right? And so it doesn't even matter what our business type is. When we're partnering with him, it can end up in this very interesting, it's like, because he has knowledge that we know not of. You know? And so being willing to yield our wisdom, experiences, and all of those things to him, to be open to how he may direct, can make such a huge difference. And ultimately that brings glory to him. That doesn't bring glory to us. Like he's awesome because we get all the accolades from the people around us. But ultimately, when you tell your testimony, it's a testimony of his goodness, because your wisdom and experience would have told you you never would have done the deal, you know? So.
Listen, I love your story. And the one thing that you mentioned, and Vojo brought it up about the countercultural kind of way of walking, right? Because I think from the outside world, especially here in the United States, right? You're walking with the Lord. This is a kingdom-based company, and what the the world is saying, right? So I bet you that you probably had some resistance from some people who are, the regular companies, right? That they're trying to run. How you deal with that kind of narrative?
Yeah, I mean, sure, there's resistance, but I don't spend a lot of time with resistance. I spend time putting out a message that if this resonates in your heart, there is an adventure on its way for you. Do you want to say yes or not? I really don't spend a lot of time focused on the resistance. So I wrote this book called Grace Over Grind, How Grace Will Take Your Business Where Grinding Can't. And even believers, there will be believers that are like, what are you saying? Like, oh, so I'm not supposed to work. I'm just supposed to wait for money to fall from the sky. What I'm supposed to, and it's just like, you know what? Did you read the book? If this is a problem for you, then just don't embrace it. But if you do, I will tell you are in for the adventure of a lifetime. It's up to you. And so I let everyone do things the way they feel like they should do them, but I am unapologetic in my approach, unapologetic. And so, and that's the way it's got to be. I mean, even other people who share the same faith will not necessarily be in agreement with, how you're operating, or won't be in agreement with the ways of the King of Kings in which they serve as it relates to business. It's just the reality of it. Everyone's in a different place when they walk with the Lord, and everyone's in a different place with how they look at their business in the grand scheme of their spiritual life and what that looks like. There's still a lot of, kind of separation and compartmentalization. But when you pull those walls down and allow God to be involved in every aspect, there's just nothing like it, and it doesn't all look like it's all out of whack and crazy and completely, not like you normally do business. I don't want to give that impression.
Right.
There's a lot of things that we do that look like normal, the way people do business, but there's also plenty of times that it doesn't look that way.
And you know what? And I love your answer, because one thing I just heard you say is you have your eyes fixed on him. You focus on him, right? You don't worry about all the other stuff. And I think that's a lot of entrepreneurs, they look at that, what's not there, like what they don't have, and focusing on the wrong things. And when you have your eyes fixed on him, all the things start to change, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
everything changes.
Well, I also wonder, just not to interrupt you, Peter, like, Shae, why do you think so few people embrace God as a business partner I'm talking about believers specifically? It's so easy to think of God as our counselor, like, oh, he's there to pick us up when we're down and we can pray for things and ask for things. But when it comes to business, like, it seems like it's not taboo, but it seems like such an overlooked area of our spiritual walk. Like, what do you think? Have you encountered that a lot?
Well, yeah. I mean, it used to be me, and I encounter it a lot. And the thing is, I think about it for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's not even that I was intentionally saying, I don't want God involved in my business. Some people are like that. Some people are like, hey, I got this thing. I got my MBA. I've learned this business thing. I got it. But for me, it wasn't an intentional decision not to involve him. It was a lack of awareness that he desired to be involved. Like, it didn't even occur to me to involve him in my business. I mean, and maybe that's strange to say, but there's a lot of people that's the case. You know, when I think about a lot of people that we get emails from our podcast and stuff like that, a lot of times they're like, this is so mind shifting for me, because it's not that it's not that I didn't want him involved in my business. It's just that I didn't make the connection, because everything that I see doesn't look like that. I don't see, like, some people, they don't even think about entrepreneurship as an option because they haven't seen it modeled before them. They haven't seen it. It's not tangible to them. It just, and so I think it's one of those things where if it's not like an awareness or something, a seed that's been planted in your heart from your relationship with the Lord, you just are just unaware. And then there's some people who believe, well, that's just spiritual mumbo jumbo stuff. And then I'd say, well, that's just someone who hasn't deepened in their relationship, their personal relationship with the Lord, where so their relationship overall is such that they've compartmentalized it, So that's a bigger thing than business. That would probably mean that he's not involved in marriage, the kids,
right.
All of the other things too, So
yeah,
that's my thinking.
That makes a lot of sense, and and to your point of things being countercultural and how, when you have God as business partner, incredible things happen. We've had people discourage even LifeNair from publicly mentioning that they're a Christian-based organization, and because that's going to ruin your business. And I think of people like in the past, as I started developing along my journey, like people like Zig Ziglar, who would unashamedly share his faith from the front of the room, or Jim Rohn, or these guys who really just took a stand, and it seemed had some real involvement of and interaction of their faith with their business, and incredible things obviously in those cases happened. And so
that's right.
Yeah, and it's incredible. And so I want to hear a little bit more about the grace over grind concept. Read the book, thought it was fantastic, and it's really funny. My daughter, she's like, "What's the name of this book? Is it Grace?" I'm like, she's like, "Oh, I get it, grace over grind." Like she's totally figured it out.
I'm glad she did, because some people haven't.
And so
that's so funny.
So now I want to talk about this for a second, because in our culture, the grind is glamorized. It is idolized. Like we have, and we hear 10x this, 1000x that. Like, if you're not working, you're nothing. And people build their identity around grind, and hey, I'm busier than you. And so this is what a clash of cultures. And two different perspectives. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, it's definitely a disruptor from the culture of entrepreneurship. So this message came, I'll tell you the birth of this message. So this was maybe a few months into Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. And I was in church, and our pastor was talking about Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through 30. And it's the scripture that you may be familiar with, where Jesus says, come to me, all those who are weary, and find rest for your souls. And he talks about how his yoke is easy and his burden is light. Well, that same scripture in the Message translation, which I had never heard before, says, "Are you tired, worn out, burnt out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I'll never lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." And man, when I heard that, it was like, okay, what is that? What's an unforced rhythm of grace? Like, what is it like to live freely and lightly? What does that, and this was after I started Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur, but that was such a light to me. It was just like everything in my spirit said, yes, 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 I want that. And so that began the journey for me personally to explore, well, what does this really look like? I've been learning what it's like to be led by you in my work, but what does it look like to work in your grace? Like what is all of that about? And so that was like the invitation that started things for me, because I grew up in the culture of grinding it out. So I could have been on the way of finding my way to grind it out, being led of the Lord, which makes no sense, right? But I could have found my way on that. If he didn't interrupt that journey right there, I could have found my way into the grind mode and grinding for the glory of God, right? So thank God that never happened. So this whole idea is that this whole thing around grinding is all about excessive hard work, right? It's just like making things happen in your own strength. But if we're saying that we are, kingdom entrepreneurs, that we're doing business with God, then we don't want to do things. We don't want to do things all in our own strength. We don't want to do things all in our own strength and then say to God be the glory, which is not even realistic, because it really wasn't to God be the glory, but to you be the glory. But what does it look like to find out? What does it look like to work with him in his grace, which is an empowerment to do all that you've been called to do, and to be all you've been called to be, and to do things you never, ever could have done on your own? Like, what does it look like to walk and work and do everything, quite honestly, in life like that? That's what that book is about. It's about exchanging something that's really subpar and not kingdom living, and exchanging that for God's best, so that you can experience what Ephesians 3:20 talks about, which is that exceeding abundantly above all you could ever ask, think, or even imagine, according to the power that works within you, right? And so that's what that message is about. And it's interesting because it was my 10th book, and the Lord told me when I was writing it, when you release this book, you're going to be the poster child of the message in this book. And I didn't know what that meant. But when I released it, I got to tell you that it's everything we were doing in Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. Then the acceleration and the growth of everything came after the release of that book and that message. So it is absolutely resonating very strongly with a lot of people, even if it leads them to lots of questions. I'm like, I'm cool with questions. Let's answer the questions. Let's explore. Let's do that. That's part of the goodness in all of this. But it's resonating in the hearts of a lot of people, because they're like, man, because I'm like, it's not just about, how when people come to their lives in the Lord, and it's like it's like the message of salvation pricks their heart, and they're like, okay, I'm going to have this relationship with Jesus, but then it kind of stops there and it doesn't like really grow. It's like, well, hey, I've got my fire insurance, as some people will say, or whatever. I kind of feel like there's this whole life in God that's amazing that some people don't explore. And I feel the same thing with this. Some people come into Grace Over Grind and say, well, I don't want to grind. Like, this is great. Like, I don't have to work so hard. I don't have to, exhaust myself. I don't have to stay in anxiety and all of that. That's cool. And I'm like, great. Step one. But also, there's a whole world of possibilities when you make the realm of the spirit more real than the circumstances around you. Like, what is it actually? There's infinite power in his grace. Don't you want that part, right? So it's been really cool over the last 2 years, since that book has come out, to start to even see the testimonies coming through from people who have shifted, the way they work, and have embraced what it looks like to work by the power of God's grace. Not just to say, I'll stop working 80 hours, or I'll stop putting my kids, my work before my husband, before my kids. That's good. That's all awesome. But those are basics. Mm-hmm. There's a whole lot of goodness in here. So let's explore it. And so it's been so fun seeing that happen all around the world. It really has been.
That is super cool. And I think at the first level, you kind of alluded to this. I feel like it's a question of identity. Are you identifying with yourself, and is your identity found with your own accomplishments, and you have to prove to yourself that you have worth, or do you have an identity with Him and your God? And that's the first step. But like you said, that's once you have that, there's this whole journey to go on. Awesome. And so, how do people what is your advice to somebody who's like, listen, this sounds amazing. I want to learn how you is it simply a matter of personal faith? Do you have anything that worked specifically for you, or you've seen in other people who want to really get that get that link, get that relationship strengthened?
Yeah, I always recommend for a first step for someone who's just like, I've never even really thought about embracing God in my work. For someone who says that, the first step I recommend with them is to start doing what I call business meetings with God. And so a lot of times people have their personal time that they have with the Lord. I pray, I read that devotional every morning, whatever. But what will it look like if you not only do that, but you also actually do your to-do list before the Lord? Like, what if you ask Him, what are your thoughts concerning my business? Where do you think I should prioritize? What's your heart concerning these people that I'm serving? Like, what if you just asked Him some questions? And what if you were quiet enough and then just believed that you heard Him when He said something? Like, when there's what if you just believe that you actually do hear Him, because He says, my sheep hear my voice, right? And then you just write it down. What if you just start by simply inviting Him into the space of your work and see what happens? And that is just the initial beginning step is massive breakthrough for a lot of people. It really is.
That is a phenomenal tip. I'm really excited for people to do that and see what the results are. You know, Steve and I have it on my wall in front of me right now. It's a stewardship covenant that Steve and I created for Life and Air that basically says we're going to involve God with every decision. We're going to act as if He's the owner and we are simply managers of the company. And we're going to do our best to kind of navigate the path that He has chosen for us. And I think it's an ongoing thing. Like, you know, I think it's, sometimes sometimes that water is really clear and you know exactly where He's leading you, and then other times it's a little murky and you can only move, you know, small steps.
A lot of times it's pretty murky.
And then you're kind of redirected and like, no, over here, silly, like, where are you going? You know?
Yes. If we feel like we have to have 100% clarity every time we move, we will never move. We will not move. So that's right. Like, so if you're expecting like the crystal clear waters all the time, sometimes you get that refreshing oasis of all these clear waters. You're like, oh, thank you, Jesus. And then a whole lot of times there's going to be a little bit of murky. And I think that's all by design too. It's just like that keeps us in this space of exploring with Him, allowing Him to be the revealer of things, allowing Him to be the source. If everything was 100% crystal clear to us all the time as humans, we would eventually we're going to start sniffing ourselves and feeling like we're thinking of ourselves more higher than we ought, and think that we got all this stuff figured out.
Yeah, where's the faith? Where's the faith if you know all the steps, right? It's just a constant exercising of faith.
Yes, that's right. It's like, you know, this is a life of faith, right?
Love that you just said you were going to eventually start sniffing ourselves. but I think, listen, the murkiness, I think, is a good thing, you know, because of the fact that it exercises your faith muscle. Yeah. Right? Because if there was clarity, pretty soon you're like, well, I can just do this. Right? You agree?
That's right. I mean, there's pieces of clarity that I have with like the work that we do, and it still can only take me so far. It can only take me so far. I can't go like off of the little pieces of clarity that I have. I can't go 10 years on that. I can't even go a full year on that, you know, but it's something that I have to work with and to continue to explore and continue to work out with Him. I now actually have vision out for about a year, but I'm almost 8 years in and I've got vision for a year. I call it vision for 3 years, but really it's really more like vision for a year.
Right. Well,
and that's okay. Like that, and that my point is that that's okay with me. Yeah. You know, so whatever it looks like, if there's more that He can show me, there's more that He can give me clarity around that won't freak me out, and He knows that I can steward that, you know, and He can trust me to continue to walk with Him in this further out, then He will give it to me further out. You know, and I just trust Him every step of the way in that. It's all good.
Shae, this has been incredible, and I really want to acknowledge you for your faithful obedience. And I'm sure you've had ups and downs and everything like that, but you have stayed on the path. And what you are doing now isn't just influencing your business and your people, but what you have essentially done, and I feel like as you and God together have dropped that pebble in the pond, and now throughout the entrepreneurial and the small business owner community, there's going to be these ripples felt in every industry, in every niche, and like this, and God's will for all of these businesses is going to come to fruition through you, and it's incredible to see this partnership that has blossomed between you and God, and you pour that into other people. How do people find out more about what you're doing? Learn more about you? Where are you? Those kinds of things.
Sure. The best place to go is to kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com, because that'll connect you to all of our resources. Of the ones that I'll recommend most would be connect with the podcast, listen to get some inspirational stories of what it looks like to partner with God. And then we have this course called Firestarter School 101 that's available at the price of your choice. And that gives you just like the basic fundamentals for beginning to make a shift into doing business in partnership with God. So those are the top two resources I'd recommend for someone to connect with once they head over to kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com.
Perfect. Highly recommend all those resources for all of our listeners. Shae, thank you so much for being a guest, and I am hoping that we can get you back on here multiple times, in fact, because I just enjoy the conversation so much.
Absolutely.
Right. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, man, that was incredible. It's inspiring, right? Like to see somebody that is that obedient with the message, with the with the assignment that she called it from God in this thing. And especially what struck me is like, she went from being a successful real estate investor and having an income and being profitable to all of a sudden God kind of pulling her aside and saying, hey, like, forget about all that stuff. Like, I want you over here. That's big. What an exercise of faith.
Yeah, it's huge to see somebody just walk in faith that way, right? I mean, it is one of the best examples that I've seen in my life of someone who's walking in faith with God and having him basically be the one who's running the business, and walking to him and asking him. And a couple of things that I've gotten the takeaways that was very important for me to take away is the faith, right? She only saw a little bit at the time, and she had the faith that he has, the 15-mile kind of a vision, 15,000-mile vision, and she only hears the next 500 feet, right? And walking in faith in that. And the other thing I saw her, the passion behind it. It is such an amazing thing to see someone walk in that way and be able to, speak and not let the naysayers or the other world, kind of knock her out, and what she's focusing on. She's got her eyes fixed on him. And it's such an amazing thing to see for someone to walk that way.
Well, I mean, think about it, because like, she's talking about how she doesn't exactly know all of the steps that she's going to be directed down. And so here, I just picture this for a second. Like you're kind of in the stage where you don't know what's next, yet you have all these people around you. And I love how she answered that question as to like, what does she do when she has worldly opinions and worldly perspectives of like kind of pouring in on her of like, hey, you should do this. Why you should do that? And she has to be so focused on that relationship with God that she's not distracted or pulled off path by these other voices or other influences. And so there's an incredible amount, I feel, of faith and strength that comes along with that. Like having the faith that like, nope, he's gonna provide, he's gonna deliver. Like I know that it's, people may look at me like I'm nuts, but I know this to be true. I know this is right. This is the way I'm supposed to go, and I'm just gonna hold tight, regardless of what he says. Right? Like he could have her completely restructure that business for all she knows, right? But it's as long as she is obedient to him, it's going to be what he wants for that business, which is incredible. Like it's just so cool to see that lived out.
Right, and she shared a couple of examples of like the guy had the deal, right? Looking on paper, the deal was not working. It's just a horrible deal. But as he was walking in obedience with the Lord, all of a sudden it became an amazing deal. And I think that's one of those things that we humans sometimes struggle with, to be able to actually walk in that walk, trusting him in that way, right? And when we do that, I think he does amazing things in our life. And I'm just inspired by it.
Totally, man. And it's awesome because, and the interesting thing is like, you can't just say that, hey, if I partner with God, then I'm going to make all this money and be profitable and be rich. Like, cause that is not God's promise. Right. Like, and so, in some cases, God may feel like he wants to humble you, and he's going to kind of lean you out a little bit and allow you to hit bottom before he builds you back up. And we know that his love for us is something that will result in what's best for us, and and that kind of thing. But it doesn't necessarily. This is one distinction. Like, and I wish I would have asked her this, but I think she'd agree with this. Like, just because you're partnered with God doesn't mean you're going to be a millionaire, right? It doesn't mean you're going to be wealthy. It means you're going to be doing his work, whatever that looks like, and he has a different role for everyone. And I do think, that everyone, regardless of your industry, regardless of your niche, your business, whatever you're in, when you partner with God, you will tap into that flow, into that relationship of what he wants for you. And I think everybody has a different version of that, but so you can't just say like, oh, I'm just going to do what Shae did, because that's probably not the message for you. That's not the assignment for you.
I totally agree, because like, for instance, dude, you could never be Polish Peter, right? Just saying, right? I mean, that's the plan that he has for me, right? But
there's only one Polish Peter. Thank God for that one, right?
Yeah. No, I'm joking around that, but I truly believe that he has a plan for each and every one of us, right? He has this thing designed for us, right? The way I am and what I do and my strengths, and it's because of him, and me and you, when we do the events, Life Under events and all that kind of stuff, we see his promises unfold all the time.
Yeah.
Even the last event that we had, it was just unbelievable, way to experience his presence in that room and be able to help, guide us through this particular event,
Right. Well, what a different sensation that is as an entrepreneur to really put your trust and faith in him. To some, you could look at it and you could be totally terrified because you're so used to putting your faith in yourself. But if you think about it, like, is there a greater security than to know that you are in alignment with him and like that he's the ultimate provider, right? So just an incredible interview. I really enjoyed it, and I definitely want to have Shae back again. And this is a game changer for a lot of businesses who decide to walk this path. And I do think it's a maturational process. It probably just doesn't happen overnight. It probably takes some time to work out. And I would encourage anybody to go listen to that KDE podcast. It is excellent. And I think you'll really enjoy that. Speaking of podcasts, we would love to hear from you. So please leave us a review wherever you are listening to this podcast. Also, we have a new Life and Air app that is awesome. It is incredible. It is amazing. It is fun. It is a community of people, both Life and Airs, wannabe Life and Airs, that are all kind of commingling and getting to know each other and helping each other live this Life and Air vision. This is something that is free, and you can go on over there and also get a free Life and Air Fast Start Kit where we have some resources and bonuses and vision workshop tools for you to help you start living this Life and Air life. And of course, pick up the Life and Air book as well if you haven't done that already. Peter, any last words for today's episode?
Yeah, Life on the App, by the way, you can get the iTunes and on Android to go to the store or go to lifeonair.com. That's it. And the last thing I want to say is particular to this episode, I think this is one of those episodes where I think it works for you to listen to it a few times because there's so many golden nuggets that I think the first time you're going to miss them.
I'm with you. I'm with you. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening to Life in Our Show. We will see you next time.